Welcome back to Is Fitz Happy? I'm Luke.
And I'm Emma.
This week we're discussing Chapter 28, Dragon Dreams. And with Reyn, of course.
Mm-hmm. And we know as rereaders, and maybe a little bit of spoiler to what we're going to talk about, but Dragon Dreams here is referring to Reyn being able to talk to Malta, or
Dreamwalk
to Malta.
Mm-hmm.
But I did have the question, what do you think dragons dream about? Prey?
Yeah.
The good old days?
Yeah. Their legs twitch in their sleep like they're hunting rabbits.
So anyway, we start this chapter off with Tintaglia and Reyn from Reyn's point of view.
They're landing at another random island, and Tintaglia is holding on to Reyn while they're landing, and it's rough for both of them, right? He has bruises around his chest from being gripped the whole time by a claw, and Tintaglia is very weary on her legs because dragons are not supposed to land on one leg, hopping around, trying to...
Well, 3 legs.
3 legs, and not to struggling not to crush Reyn in the process.
Yes. So everybody's tired and nothing's going well, and Tintaglia seems to be in a little bit of a mood. So they're arguing a little bit.
Just snapping at each other. Dragons were never meant to land like that. Well, humans were never meant to be dropped that way. She's finally like, okay, I'm going to go hunt.
Right. Well, no, Reyn tells her, just go hunt, because he knows that she's hungry, and at this point, everything will be his fault, and it will all just be an argument. So better to let her get her belly filled.
Mm-hmm. A little hangry.
Yes. And she complains as she goes off to go hunt, saying, if I'll have any luck with the light, because it's winter now and light has gone down. It's been a short day.
Yep.
As all winters are.
But she does end it with, I'll try to bring you some fresh meat. She always said that. Sometimes she actually remembered to do it.
Right. Which is big development. It kind of shows more of a pack mentality between the two of them, at least on Tintaglia's side, that she's starting to also think about his food as well. Not always, but a little bit, which is good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he's kind of gotten used to traveling with her. He can't fully get used to it because he has basically permanent bruises on his chest from being carried, but he's used to the routine now. So he waits until she flies away, then he stands up and he'll look for food and water, and if not, he'll dig into his stores and then try to sleep. He bundled himself up near the fire and took whatever sleep he could get. Tintaglia was right about her hunting. The short winter day had passed swiftly, and the stars were already starting to show in the sky. It was going to be clear and cold. At least he would not be rained on tonight, only frozen. He vaguely wonders about how the people are getting on back in Bingtown with Tintaglia's orders. Dredging the Rainwild River is not going to be fun, and the tattooed people who are going to gain Rainwild trader status, are going to work for that status.
Right. It will be a tough mission.
Mm-hmm.
They'll have paid fairly for it, is what he thinks.
And then he also thinks about Bingtown and the results of what has been happening there since they left. So when they left, it was peaceful for a while. They had made their promises and Reyn left. So he's wondering, did that still hold? Is everybody still united? Did the Chalcedeans come back and attack? Because Tintaglia was very brutal, and maybe the promise and the threat of her kind of turned them away from Bingtown.
Right.
But he doesn't know.
And it's even scarier because he's been seeing more and more Chalcedean ships as they've gone along.
Yes, both oared and sailing ships. The number of them convinced him that their plans included something more significant than overwhelming Bingtown. The ships were all moving south. They traveled as Chalcedean war clans did, with one great sailing ship for supplies and several galleys for raiding and fighting. Once they had flown over a smoking village, possibly a pirate settlement, raided by Chalcedeans on their way south. He also mentions that Tintaglia takes pleasure in menacing the ships as they fly past.
Right. So they're at least she's at least finding some joy on this hunt.
Mm-hmm.
And he also talks about how because there's so many of them, he has been starting to get worried that maybe Tintaglia was right. This is stupid. He doesn't know if Malta's on any of those ships.
Right.
But Tintaglia says that she hasn't been on any of the ones they've seen. With how close they get, she would know.
Yes. It is a sense you do not possess, and hence I cannot explain it to you, she added condescendingly. Imagine trying to explain a sense of smell to someone who had none. What sounds like an arbitrary, almost mystic ability is no different from smelling apple blossoms in the dark. Hope filled Reyn's heart to breaking, and anxiety clawed him daily. Each day that passed was another day of separation from her, but worse, it was another day of Malta and Chalcedonian captivity. He cursed his imagination for how it tormented him with images of her in coarse hands. As he bedded down near the fire, he hoped he would not dream tonight. Too often his dreams of Malta turned to nightmares.
So before we go on, I just wanted to make a quick statement about how Tintaglia is so sure she will know Malta is there. And I'm wondering if that ability that she's talking of is part of the wit sense of like a bonded partner in a way, where like Fitz knows where
something
Night Eyes
similar,
is.
you mean?
Yeah, something in that vein. Because I was thinking about how Fitz knows where Night Eyes is, and if he were to walk by several, for whatever reason, he'd walk by several homes, one of them has Night Eyes in it, he would be able to feel Night Eyes in the home that he walked by.
Right.
I mean, he could also feel every other person inside and all the animals, but he's bonded with Night Eyes and therefore has a more distinct connection. So I'm wondering if it's something similar to that, and Reyn just wouldn't understand that. Like, that's not, maybe he's not witted at all.
Yeah.
Which I think is an interesting thing to think about, that he...
Well, and again, we have to explain that dragons are not witted, right? This is different, but we're explaining it in the terms that we know.
Yes, yeah. But I do think it's interesting to think about the idea of Reyn not having any wit capacity, but still being able to communicate effectively with dragons.
Right, because as we kind of find out, it's mostly your availability and ability to skill.
Yes. So I find that part really interesting, especially as we later get to see Fitz interact with dragons when he is witted.
Yeah.
Because I think there is a lot more of that description of the serpentile nature and the more animalistic descriptions when he's talking with them of what he's sensing.
Because he uses everything intertwined.
Yes. And it's not that other people don't mention that they're serpentine-like, and these dragons are serpentine-like. Obviously, they smell like snakes or something. Whenever Tintaglia was hashing, it was lots of snake smell being described. But I think that's not necessarily their main focus. And when they're talking to each other, it's more of like one being to another rather than an animal to a human.
Right.
And I find that distinction very interesting. So I don't know. But I did think, oh, this is probably a lot like the wit.
Yeah.
That what she's using.
Just something that she can't explain because she's not going to try.
Right. Also that.
She is a dragon.
It actually isn't that hard to explain that like beings are connected on some level.
Yeah. So he is recalling fondly the last time that he actually was with Malta and holding her in his arms.
And how inappropriate it was.
Yeah. They were in her bed in the Reyn Wilds as she was recovering, and they had the whole reconciliation there and forgiving each other. And he refused to lift up his veil and show her his face. He's like, oh, when we're married.
Right.
Or you're promising to marry me.
Yeah, if you promise to marry me, I'll show you. And he didn't. And so she never got to see his face pre the changes.
Yeah. So sometimes in his dreams, when he finally held her safe in his arms, he foolishly allowed her to lift his veil. Always she recoiled in horror and struggled from his embrace. This would not do. He would never fall asleep with such thoughts. So then he forces his thoughts to a better track, trying to recall Malta at a window looking over Trehog, while he drew a brush through her thick black hair.
I find it really interesting that both Malta and Reyn, their biggest fear is each other seeing their faces and recoiling in disgust.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like they both share that fear. I don't know. I just find that really interesting.
A very classic trope in like romance stories, kind of, but not the most common one, but I feel like I've read things like this before.
Yeah. The changes make me too different. You won't like me.
Exactly. So he remembers a good memory instead and tries to force his mind to what she was like in that present time, and he tastes some of the candy that he brought with
him. Her candy.
Yes, from Selden. Her honey drops. So he's skimming sleep when Tintaglia returns. He's just kind of dozing off, and she wakes him and does the whole ritual. She adds way too much wood to the fire and falls asleep on the outside of him, trapping the heat. So he's super comfortable and instantly falls into a deep, deep sleep and instantly dreams. In his dream, he once more drew a brush down the shining length of Malta's hair, but this time she stared out over the bow of a ship as he did so. The night was clear and cold. Stars shone sharply above her, piercing the winter night. He heard the snap of canvas in the wind. On the horizon, the black shapes of islands blotted out the stars, glittering stars that swam as she looked up at them, and he knew that tears stood in her eyes. "How did I ever come to be so alone?" she asked the night. She lowered her head, and he felt the warm drip of tears down her cheeks. His heart smote him. Yet in the next instant, his chest swelled with pride in her as she lifted her head once more, her jaw set in determination. He felt her draw a deep breath and stood with her as she squared her shoulders and refused to surrender to despair. He knew in that instant that he desired nothing more than to stand at her side. She was no cooing dove of a woman to be sheltered and protected. She was a tigress, as strong as the wind that swept her, a partner a rain-wild man could depend on. The strength of his emotion rushed out and wrapped her like a blanket. "Malta, my dear, my strength to you," he whispered, "for you are my strength and hope." She turned sharply at his words. "Reyn? Reyn?" The hope in her voice jolted him awake. Before we talk about that, let's talk about the dream a little bit.
Right.
And it mirrors his thought, his initial memory that he was kind of surfacing up before he fell asleep.
Right.
And without knowing it, he does dreamwalk here.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because we see a little bit of the commonality of how people dreamwalk, or at least how Fitz uses the skill to dreamwalk. And it's a little bit that the other person is calling out to you, right? I'm sure in that moment, Malta's thinking of Reyn.
Yeah.
She's mentally opening up to him. But then also, Reyn went to sleep thinking really intently of Malta and thinking what she might be doing and trying to think positively. Mm-hmm. And also ate a treat that did belong to her. It was her possession, which is another anchorage to Malta.
And we have to remember that every time your mind connects to someone, there's a little bit of a path left, right? So he's already connected to her through a dream box, and then they've also connected through Tintaglia a few times.
Right.
So there's a little bit of a connection through Tintaglia right there. So with all of that in mind, he does manage to go to her.
Yeah, fully on accident.
His description here is, man, he and Malta are just made for each other. It's just such like a romance novel description of like...
He's really setting up the camera angle perfectly to capture this moment. Mm-hmm. Interestingly, no mention of the wound on her head.
Yeah, because I feel like he's inside of her head.
Oh, okay.
Right? Because he looks up at the stars and they're blurry and he feels the tears on her cheeks. Like it says that he feels those things. So I think he like gets into it. It's weird where like it feels like he's observing her from the outside, but he's also on the inside of her head.
Right.
So I think it's kind of like his vision of Malta superimposed over what she's actually going through in that time. So it doesn't show her as she is really.
Okay.
Because it's his idea of her.
Yeah, that's fair.
I don't know. But yeah, he wakes up from that hope in her voice.
Right. And before we get into the conversation, sorry, I did just want to point out that I thought it was really interesting that he talks about how Malta is so strong. He's so proud of her for being strong and not succumbing to crying over being lonely. She's determined and she's the perfect match for any rain-wild man. I found that really interesting because... First of all, I think it's the first time anybody is describing Malta as a strong woman who can handle her own, which is important. But also, I feel as though the reason he liked her to begin with wasn't necessarily because she was a strong woman who could hold her own, but maybe not. No. Maybe it kind of was. Maybe her tenacity is what he liked.
So there's a couple things about that. One, obviously, it's just attraction and like the mystery that when they first met. But there is a point of view I remember specifically where he thinks about what it takes to be a partner to someone or like married to someone.
Right.
And he says like, oh, I saw this fierceness in Malta that, you know, can be molded to be a great virtue for a family, to protect the family interests. And I saw that potential in her. So this is like an acknowledgement that she's there.
Okay.
So I think like he mentioned it before, but it wasn't really at the forefront of the whole courting thing. But it was like, I can see a future with her and she would be great as a head of family or like a partner to be a head of family.
Okay.
But now he's like, oh, she is strong and she would be a great partner right now.
Yeah. I guess, yeah, that's the only thing I just wanted to bring up because this is the first time when he's describing Malta and what he likes about her, where it doesn't feel uncomfortable and weird. Still gross. Still a weird age gap. I can't let that go. However, this is the first time where what he's saying about her and what he's admiring about her doesn't feel as icky. So anyway, he's woken up by the surprise in her voice.
Yes, and Tintaglia is very impressed and surprised that Reyn was dreamwalking, saying, I thought only an elderling could dreamwalk on his own. It was like sharing the dream box with her. It was real, wasn't it? I was with her as she stood there. It was definitely a sharing with her and real, but I do not know what you mean by a dream box. So he describes it a little bit and then he stops because he knew that if he continued on the details, he would have to mention that a little bit of wizard wood was powdered with the sleeping herbs. Right. And that's not a great thing to mention to a dragon that's like, protect these, you like violated all these wizard wood cocoons.
Also potentially is from her own wizard wood cocoon.
Maybe.
Right? Like,
probably not.
You don't think they would have just shaved off a little at a time?
I feel like they took the logs out and then prepared those logs and then
and all
used
the,
like the sawdust. Yeah.
Okay. Sure. I was going to say, what if it is from Tintaglia's cocoon and that's why she has more of a claim on them or whatever?
Yeah, I don't know. So he continues on basically explaining the what happens, not the how it happens.
Exactly.
Says, usually when they meet in dreams, they share what they imagine, but tonight I felt as if Malta was awake and I was with her. And the dragon, Tintaglia, is really smug and like, yeah, you were.
Yeah, that is what happened.
Pity you were not more adept at such dream travel, for if you were, you could have made her aware of yourself and she would have told you where to find her. I saw the stars. I know the heading her ship is on, and I know that she was not in pain nor confined in any way. Dragon, you cannot know how heartening that is to me. Can't I? Reyn, the longer we are in proximity, the thinner the barriers between us will grow. The elderlings who could dreamwalk were all dragon friends. I suspect your newfound ability has the same source. Look at yourself. Daily you take on more of my aspects. So I want to talk about that before I get to like his description real quick.
Yeah.
Because there is a distinction here between elderlings and dragon friends.
Yeah.
So elderlings, as I'm understanding it from Tintaglia's point of view, are those who chose to live in an environment where they welcomed dragons.
Yeah.
They were the ones who willingly were in that area and would change.
Yeah.
Dragon friends are what everybody else calls elderlings.
Mm-hmm.
Is like, oh, you are partnered with a dragon. They are guiding your changes. No, that's not what happened. Even the farmers outside of Kelsengro a long time ago would probably be known as elderlings.
Yeah.
But they would not be dragon friends because dragon friends are chosen and friends, specifically of a dragon.
Yeah. They are just closer. They have a closer relationship. It's not just a being that you're allowing into your space that you appreciate. It's that there's that sort of mutual give and take, it seems, between the two.
Yes. So Tintaglia does describe the changes that are going on in Reyn right now, basically saying, your eyes weren't always copper. They never really glowed like this before. Your nail beds are getting way thicker. changes are happening rapidly to you.
I will just say the thickening of the nail beds really grosses me out. Of all the things.
Thickening of the nails that mimic my claws.
Like, ew. I hate that. But anyway, not important. Just thought I'd give my opinion there.
Even encapsulated in our cocoons, my kind left its mark on yours. Now that dragons are awake and walking in the world once more, those who claim friendship with us will wear the badges of that association. So that is, from a dragon, confirmation that the dragons that were in the cocoon are the ones affecting the changes. It's not just the elderling magic in the city or anything like that. It's the presence of the dragons.
Yeah, the proximity to the dragon kind.
Yeah. And that really goes hand in hand with what Robin Hobb wants out of these series, that common theme of when two beings are next to each other for a while and share the same space, their essences mingle.
Yes.
And they become different. Reyn, if you find a mate and if you can father children, you will get the next generation of elderlings. So he's very startled by this and surprised. And he's like, what? And then speaks into his mind. He's like, hey, open your thoughts, show me the stars, and I'll see if I recognize anything.
Tintaglia reaches out to do that. Yeah.
Tomorrow we resume our search for a woman worthy to be mother to elderlings. Yeah. So again, like, we have this distinction from Tintaglia of dragon friends versus elderlings, but then she just immediately is like, these are going to be elderlings.
Yeah.
Because their son is not technically a dragon friend.
Yeah.
They don't have a dragon that is like, hey, I like you a lot. Maybe Tintaglia is like, no, your son sucks.
Yeah. You know what? That would actually be pretty rough if you were elderling parents and you're dragon friends and you're like, oh, we have a baby, let's show it. And the dragon's like, ugh.
It'd be tough the other way around too. If like you were passed over and then your kid was like, well,
they like the kid. Also, would be rough if you had like siblings and some of your siblings were dragon friends and you weren't.
But if you're in that environment, right, raised in that society, that's a huge honor. And yeah, there's still going to be
rivalries
and there's still going to be jealousy and everything. Like, they're still human.
Right.
Kind of.
Just longer living humans. Although, I don't know, once they've changed that much, are they still considered human? Because Beloved doesn't consider themselves to be.
Well, whites were completely separate as well. A separate race.
Does Elderling count too? Because it does change your insides, right?
Yeah, a little bit, I think. Yeah. At least enough to have deformities and shorten lifespans.
If it's not carefully curated, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we kind of get confirmation that Reyn is becoming an elderling. Although even reading through this the first time, you can kind of put that together, right? I think. But this is news to Reyn, and it's finally confirmation to the reader as well. Like, hey, yeah, you are going to be close to me forever. You are going to be what the people in the first trilogy readers that you were reading were looking for.
Exactly.
To be that elderling. And then finishes off this section with, okay, we'll look for the mother to elderlings.
Yes. And I think also importantly, there is that working together aspect that's happening where they're going to work together to find her. And now they have a place to start more so than they did before.
Right.
Because they have stars and scenery to work with. And potentially Tintaglia will be able to recognize that, which we know she will, because Paragon was telling us just last chapter that in his memories, Pirate Isles are the tips of mountain ranges from his time, or as a dragon, I guess. So hopefully that means there's a little bit more direction on their end.
Yeah.
And there's more hope in their finding of her.
Yeah. You have to remember, though, Paragon has been sailing these seas for at least 60 years.
Absolutely, yeah.
So he has a little bit more familiarity with the islands themselves as not mountains, so he can compare the two. Tintaglia is just born and in a confusing world still, so
that's true.
They do have more of an idea, but yes, I think Paragon's dragons have a little bit more comparison, details to compare to.
Fair.
So then we switch over to Malta's point of view, and she's very confused because she actually feels like she did feel Reyn. Like, Reyn? Her heart hammering. Foolishness, she knew. but it had seemed so real. She had felt his touch on her hair. She had tasted his scent on the air. It could not be. It was only her childish heart yearning after a lost past. Even if she could return to Bingtown, she could never be who she had been. The ridged scar down her forehead was stigma enough, but it would be added rumors and gossip. Reyn himself might still want her, but his family could not permit the marriage. She was a ruined woman. The only socially acceptable end for her in Bingtown was to live simply and out of sight. She set her jaw and let anger be her strength. She would never go back to that. She would churn her way forward against a tide of misfortune and build a new life for herself. Dreaming of the past could only cripple her with longing. Resolutely, she set thoughts of Reyn aside. Coldly, she assessed the only tools that remained to her. Her body and her wits were hers. She would use them.
I think that's a really important thing that I want to touch on now and at the end of the chapter.
Yeah.
But to Malta, her body and her wits is all she has. And she's standing at the face of never being able to be free in Bingtown again in a way that she could before. She is worried that she's going back to solitude. There's nothing for her as things stand. And she can't stand that idea.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how her mother lived. I mean, not in disgrace, but quiet and out of sight and just...
She had friends over.
Yeah. But I think it's really...
parties and stuff, but yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting I don't want to be hidden away from society and not allowed to interact. That's not my place, and I do not want to settle for that.
Later on in this chapter, she talks about how her plan at the moment is, before the end of the chapter, is to negotiate the release of the satrap and go back with him to Jamalia, to be indispensable to him, basically, by the time that this is all done, so that she can be free with the satrap and somehow leverage that to have a life.
Right. Because to her,
start new.
Her independence and power that she has gained is not something she wants to give away now.
It's very similar to Cyrilla's story. However, it's using the same person in a different way.
Right.
Because Cyrilla was trying to use the satrap to get away from him and to get away from her life, and went through something awful and has to reclaim herself and her power in a new city. Right. And Malta has to use the satrap and stay with the satrap to reclaim a new life.
Right.
So she thinks about her tools, and then she thinks about her environments and the two people that she has to deal with right now, Captain Red and the satrap. One, Captain Red, wants to seduce her, and she thinks that he fancies himself as her instructor in carnal pleasure. And the satrap obviously just sees her as a woman. A female, probably, in his mind.
As though he was a child and she's a candy.
Yes.
It's not because he desires her.
Just physical consolation for times of duress.
Yes. So I think that's also added pressure on her, that she has to deal with these two men that are, trying to get with her. And she does not want to do that.
She says the avid gallantries of the one and the pawing pleas of the other left her feeling grimy and jaded. Each must be discouraged, but not completely denied all possibility. She thinks that she needs to have their imaginations still kind of be strung along so she can retain some of that power.
And gain something out of it, right? Yes. If they're more willing to work with her if they think they might get something out of it at the end. And
trying
she recognizes
to impress
her. That. Yeah. Which I think really goes back to when Malta was first entering society. And people were telling her, there's more to being a grown-up than just wearing pretty dresses and going to balls and dancing with people. There is also the undercurrent of how people act and think that you have to worry about. You have to worry about every little move
this
you do.
Is it.
Yeah, and this is it to an extreme scale, obviously.
Right.
But this is what people are worried about her not grasping. And she is sort of excelling in this area of being able to manipulate both of these men in a way that keeps her from having to do anything, but doesn't shut them down entirely.
Yeah, because she also needs stuff from them. One, the freedom from Captain Red to walk around, to dine, to do anything like that. And from the satrap, information. He tells stories once in a while, you know, and she needs that information to help negotiate freedom for herself and the satrap.
Exactly.
For she was determined to ransom Cosgo as well as herself. Somehow, during her captivity with the satrap, he had become her possession. As annoying as he was, she felt a proprietary sense toward him. She had kept him alive and intact. If anyone was going to profit from his value as a hostage, it would be Malta Vestrit. Satrap Cosgo would be the key to her survival in Jamalia. When the satrap was released to his Jamalian ransomers, she would go with him. By then, she would be indispensable to him. So then she, as we're led into this conversation about the satrap, she knocks on the door to their room.
Yes. And I think it's really interesting to see that just this overwhelming feeling of, like, I need to use these men so that I can get power and help myself. Mm-hmm. And there's still that feeling of men have the power and I have to take that from them to use.
Right.
Which I think has been sort of her way of thinking all along. But in a lot of ways, it's...
Not all along, I will say. True. That it changed quite drastically in Bingtown.
Men have always had the power in her mind, but she has learned that, number one, men are fickle. Yeah. And number two, they can be led to do other things.
Yes.
And so, like, they do have power, but it's not the absolute unfailing power that she thought it was before.
Mm-hmm. So she knocks on the door and he calls out, "Why bother? You know, you're going to enter whether or not I want you to." She's like, "Yeah, that is true, Lordly One." Calls him Magdadon Satrap. And he's just like, "Stop it. You know, I'm just as I was last night. You don't have to ask after me.
I'm miserable, sick, bored, and betrayed, just like every other night."
Yeah. She did not react to his insult here, staring at her accusingly during the betrayed. "Actually, you appear to be much better, but it is stuffy in this little room. There is cool breeze outside. I thought you might wish to join me in a turn about the deck." The satrap's seasickness had finally passed. In the last 2 days, his appetite had increased. The plain ship's fare she brought to him had not changed, but he had given up complaining about it. Tonight, his eyes were clear for the first time since she had known him. So this is Satrap Cosgo maybe over his addictions a little bit. This is
sober Cosgo at the very least.
Mm-hmm. And that's the first time since Malta has known him that has kind of gotten all out of his system. Yeah. And he was seasick before, and yes, he has gotten seasick, but it's also probably a little bit of withdrawal.
Well, absolutely, because, you know, he was begging for smokes and the drugs and such. And I think he really was having a hard time in the Rain Wilds. He still was given smokes, I believe, there, but it wasn't the good quality that he liked and all that. And so this is the first time he's truly been denied having what he's asked for, I think.
Because Captain Red doesn't have it on the ship.
Yes. And I guess for a little bit in the last, and on the Chalcedean ship before Malta made a big fuss about how they were being treated, he didn't have anything, but he was also super sick and in bed there, which probably was from withdrawals as much as it was seasickness from being on board a ship.
So she continues on like, "Hey, let's go up. Let's walk around the deck." And he's like, "Why should I?" "Oh, well, Lordly One would enjoy..." "Stop it. Magdadon Satrap, stop mocking me. Lordly this and mighty that. I am nothing of that, not anymore. And you despise me. So stop pretending otherwise. It demeans us both." "You sound like a man," she exclaimed before she could stop herself. He gave her a baleful glance. "What else should I sound like?" "I spoke without thinking, my lord." "You do that frequently. So do I. It is one of the few things I enjoy about you." She was able to continue smiling by reminding herself that he belonged to her. So this is the first time that, like, he has said to her the actual situation, that he can actually understand the situation. Like, "Hey, you hate me. Stop pretending to flatter me for a second.
Right. Like,
give
actually,
it to me straight."
Yeah, this is actually really annoying, and I don't like this fakeness. Like, just stop.
And because she thinks of him as a child all the time, she's very surprised. And before she can think, she's like, "Oh, you're speaking like a man."
Yeah. Like, oh my gosh.
You're grown up.
Which I think is fair, that if he was suffering with addiction and withdrawals before, it does explain a lot. Number one, of his moodiness, but number two, also his gullibility and the reasonings why he might have gone along with thinking he's the best of the best. We
also learn about that later too.
Yeah. And just, it's really interesting to see that without all of that clouding his judgment, he's almost becoming a normal person.
Right.
Still arrogant and annoying, but definitely much more down to earth and less clouded in his judgment of what's going on, maybe.
Yeah. So he super surprises Malta here and decides to go out. And she finds a cloak for him, puts it around it, and he's walking like an invalid with small hesitant steps. But she resists the impulse to hurry him along, everything like that. So it's very crisp winter night outside. He gasps and stops there, and she thinks that he's going to go back, but he kind of steels himself and walks forward a few steps. In his old man's shuffle, he toddled toward the railing to stare out over the wide water and up the night sky as if it were a foreign landscape. He was puffing as if he had just run a race. After a time, he observed aloud, "The world is a wide and savage place. I never fully realized that until I left Jamalia. Magdadon Satrap, I am sure your nobles and your father felt the need to protect the heir to the Pearl Throne. There was a time," he began hesitantly, a line furrowed in his brow. "It is like recalling another life. When I was a boy, I used to ride and hawk. One year, when I was 8, I caused a stir by entering the summer races. I raced against the other boys and young men of Jamalia. I did not win. My father praised me all the same, but I was devastated. You see, I had not known I might lose." His voice trailed away, but Malta could almost see the intentness of his thought. "They neglected to teach me that, you see. I could have learned it when I was younger, but they took away the things I did not succeed at and praised my every success as if it were a wonder. All my tutors and advisors assured me I was a marvel, and I believed them, except that I began to see the disappointment in my father's eyes. When I was 11, I began to learn the pleasures of men. Fine wines, cunningly mixed smokes, and skilled women were gifts to me from nobles and foreign dignitaries, and I sampled them all. And oh, how I succeeded with them! The right smoke, the right wine, the right woman can make any man brilliant. Did you know that? I didn't. I thought it was all me, shining like the high jewel of all Jamalia." He turned abruptly away from the sea. "Take me back in. You are wrong. It is cold and wretched out here." "Of course, Magdadon Satrap," Malta murmured. He leans on her all the way back to the chamber.
I think that insight to Cosgo is really interesting.
Yeah. It's like reinforced that he could do no wrong.
Exactly. And it wasn't just the people around him, it was his dad too.
Well, his dad remained distant, I got from this reading at least. You can tell me what you got from the reading, okay. But like for me, it felt like his dad really didn't take a role in that and encouraged him to do whatever and cheered him on and things, but stayed distant. And it felt to me like the tutors and the advisors took away the things that he wasn't good at.
Yeah, definitely that. But I think when reading that, even though he didn't win, his father still praised him like he did an amazing job. That sort of thing, I feel like points to a little bit of his spoiling of his son. I mean, obviously that's fine, but I mean,
just look at it from an outside. You're a father cheering on your 8-year-old, cheering them up after they like ran a race, you know, like, "Oh, you did a great job." That's what I got that from.
Well,
that.
Yeah, but I think there's no moment of talking about, obviously his son was disappointed to lose. There's no moment of talking about, well, yeah, that happens sometimes, but that's okay. Everybody goes through it. It was like, no, but it doesn't mean anything because you're amazing. And I think that points to the coddling to a degree that was harmful. I don't think he meant it to be harmful. I don't think he was thinking
but that and with everything else.
Yeah, that didn't help because it does reinforce the Cosgo that like he's amazing and everything he does is amazing.
Right.
And clearly that disillusioned him from that and probably helped to turn him to going towards drugs and drinking and women because he was good at that. And that did make him feel like he was top of the world. And nobody could take that away. And no matter what he did, that was amazing. I think that earlier experience of realizing people are taking away anything I'm bad at and they're just giving me the stuff I'm good at and they keep giving me drugs and women and alcohol, I must be really good at that. I think that really did a lot of damage.
Well, yeah, you're 11 years old and everyone who has tried alcohol and become intoxicated knows the feeling of dropped inhibitions, right? Like you feel more confident speaking. You feel more confident doing whatever you were thinking of because you don't have that self-doubt in you.
Right.
So at 11 years old, after being praised all the time that you are amazing and feeling that intoxication, that confidence come out with the wine and the smoking herbs and stuff like that, feeling really good. Everyone's laughing around you. The women are laughing and stuff because obviously they're going to, you're the satrap's son.
Right.
You feel like you are the one doing all this. You know, he convinced himself through the other people saying that he was always amazing, that he was the witty one.
Yeah.
It's not the drugs and the wine and the gifts and the people who are, the sycophants who are going to laugh at whatever you say. Right. He is the witty one. He is the smart one. He is the funny one, So he convinced himself through all those things that it wasn't any influence from anything else.
Yeah. And obviously...
He's 11 years old.
11. That is really heartbreaking, actually.
Yeah.
Because he really was let down by the adults in his life.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, we can talk about how he isn't that great of a person now as an adult. But, thinking about you're 11 years old and all the adults in your life are saying, yeah, you can drink and smoke and do that. And he talks about how his dad he knew he wasn't doing good because even though everybody else was telling him he was amazing, his dad started looking at him with disappointment and that frustrated him. Mm-hmm. And he hated that feeling. And so it makes sense that he goes more into the things that make him feel good.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't know how to handle that. And nobody stood up for him. And apparently he actually was pretty smart because Cirilla talks about how he had a lot of promise up until 11.
Amber talks about that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. How he was very inquisitive and, he seemed like he had a lot of
Yeah.
And was going to go far. And then he just stagnated.
Yeah. So, it is a mixture of him being oh, maybe I wasn't actually that good. And maybe it did just seem like he was really smart if they were only giving him the things he excelled at.
I trust, Beloved's take on that.
Either way, I think it is a really interesting look at what happened. And it kind of makes me frustrated with his dad, the other satrap. Yeah. What was he doing? Why was he allowing this to happen? Why didn't he step in? The kid is 11. You're allowed to step in and say, no more drugs or alcohol. That's part of being a parent, I think, question mark.
Yeah.
Maybe any parents out there, let me know if it's not. But I think the main thing you have to do as an adult is
set limitations and boundaries for your child that are healthy.
Teach your kid, hey, sometimes you don't do these things. And he didn't have that. And that's so frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah. So Malta walks him back to the room. And once inside, he just kind of goes to his bed and says, I wish Kiki were here. She could always warm me. When no other woman could stir me, she could. So he's still looking at a woman as a physical comfort and that's it.
Yes, he does want that. And Malta knows this is him in a roundabout way trying to get her to do something.
So she's trying to hastily excuse herself here.
She puts on her cloak. She's by the
door.
Leave
you to rest.
Bye. Have a good sleep.
But he stops her with his voice saying, what is to become of me, Malta? Do you know? My lord, I do not know. You know more than I. For the first time since I became satrap, I think I understand what companions of the heart are supposed to do. Not that many of mine did it. They are to know the details of that which I have had no time or opportunity to learn. And they are to be truthful, not flattering, not tactful, truthful. So, tell me, what is my situation and what do you advise? Malta's like, I'm not a companion. And
I'm not
Cosgo's like, yeah, no, you're definitely not. Yeah. That's embarrassing.
Ditto.
But like,
ditto disgust.
Tell me about the situation as if you were right now. So she is truthful. She's like, hey, you're going to be a gift to King Kenneth. Captain Red thinks he's going to ransom you to the highest bidder, but even that is not assured. Because if Kenneth does, and coin is all that can bring that you can bring to him, then it will not matter to him if the buyer is your enemy or your ally. Captain Red has urged me to discover who among your nobles would offer the most for you. I suppose that means they already know which of my enemies will bid for me. I don't know, Malta thought hard. I think that you should consider which of your allies might offer a fat reward for your life. When the time comes, you should write a letter asking them to ransom you. Foolish child, that is not how it will be done. I will negotiate my own ransom with Kenneth, issue him letters of credit, and insist that he provide me passage back to Jamalia. I am the satrap, you know. So Malta here is like, my lord satrap, and then firmed her voice because he had asked for truthfulness. So she's just going to give it to him straight and see what he does with it.
Exactly.
And lays it on him saying, like, others see it differently. I think Kenneth is only going to want cold coin. So
credit isn't enough.
Yeah. You have to have a list of people who will give you actual cash. He will not, because Kenneth won't care who it comes from.
Right.
That is why you must think and think well for yourself, whose fidelity is unquestionable, who has both loyalty to you and wealth enough to buy your freedom. Cosgo laughs. He's like, that's simple. No one. As to wealth, why, those who are the wealthiest have the most to gain by my being lost. If I perish, someone must become satrap. Why use your wealth to buy the occupant of a throne when the throne itself could be yours? That wounds Malta there. She's like, oh, my plan is going down the drain.
Yeah, she's like literally watching her plan of freedom and escape dying in front of her.
So no one will ransom you? And he laughs again. He's like, oh, yeah, someone will. But it's going to be the people who never want to see me again. So they're going to need me and probably you to disappear. I am not stupid, Malta. The Bingtown traders were correct. There was a conspiracy, and it must have involved nobles and Chalcidian diplomats and even new traders. They bit the hand that fed them, for each thought that once that hand was removed, each could claim a lion's share of the meat. Then they will be squabbling over that division even now, Malta hazarded. It all comes down to a bargain. Grandmother always said, look to see who benefits the most. She told me that when you want to cut your way into a bargain that others are striking, you must look for the one who is benefiting the least. Shore up his interest, and he will take you as a partner. So, who benefits the least by your being removed from the throne? Cosgo's a little bit offended by this and being like, don't reduce me to your squabblings as a merchant. Come on, I'm more powerful than that. And Malta's like, okay, hold on. We deal in goods, you deal in power. We're not so different.
Yeah, it's all the same.
Yeah.
You just are looking at it differently.
Exactly.
But I find it really interesting that she's using her grandmother's words of wisdom here. And it really shows how much she did learn from Ronica and
despite Ronica's help.
Yes, despite Ronica not thinking Malta was getting anything from it, Malta actually was learning. And she did take that, begrudgingly or not, and is using that now to help her move forward.
Yes.
And is able to point out to the satrap who rules over where she lives her whole life, or has ruled over it her whole life, to say, hey, idiot, like, it is the same thing. Being a ruler, being a merchant, it's all deals. You're always making choices. And what is that if not making a deal?
So the satrap's unimpressed, but he answers her question anyway, saying, like, well, everyone benefits from my absence, all nobles with money or influence anyways. So Malta's like, oh, there's your answer. We have to ally with those who don't have money or influence. And Cosgo's like, oh, wow, what great allies. Perfect. What will they buy my freedom with? Sticks and stones, dung and dust?
To be fair, she's not explaining herself very well.
Right.
And of course, Cosgo's going to be like, yeah, okay, like that's going to work.
Before you consider how they will buy your freedom, you must consider why it would profit them. Make them see it as to their advantage to free you, and they will find the means. She sits down, and the satrap sat up to face her. So, think now. It's no use. She kind of describes him as looking very ill and like a grievously ill child. It's no use. It's all too far away. No one in Jamalia will rouse to my cause. He kind of, self-pityingly, like, my enemies are going to buy me, and that's it. You see, Malta, not everything can be solved with your trader's ethic of buying and selling. So that strikes an idea in her head. It's like, What if it could? What if I can save you and your throne? What would it be worth to me? You can't, so why even speculate? And she brings up what she said before, like, okay, I'll worry about the means if you can make it worth my while.
Yeah, I'll make a wager with you.
Yeah.
Because he tries to dismiss her. He tries to say, it's not going to happen. This is pointless. I want to sleep now. And she says, no, you're not going to sleep. You're going to sit here and pity yourself all night. So instead of doing that, let's figure out what to do.
Rouse to my challenge. You say I cannot save you. I think I can. Let's make a wager. And she starts with saying, if I save you, I am saved alongside you. You will give me an appointment to, do not ask to be a companion of my heart. That would be too humiliating. As well, ask me to wedge you. Spark of anger flashed in her. I assure you, I would not humble myself. No.
Good for you, Malta.
You will appoint me and my family as your representatives in Bingtown and the Reyn Wilds. You will recognize Bingtown and the traders there as an independent entity. To my family, to the Vestrits, will go the exclusive right to represent Jamalian interests there. A slow smile dawned on her face as the full brilliance of her idea shone in her mind. So with all of that, she's like, I can return to Bingtown. It doesn't matter what I look like.
Right.
I have freed Bingtown. I have granted my family power. So they're going to welcome me back. Even grandmother will be proud of me.
Right. And I mean, honestly, it is a brilliant plan, right? Like if she can get them free, she is assuring that they don't have to worry about Jamalia fighting for Bingtown and bringing them back into the fold. Mm-hmm. They're acknowledging Bingtown. That's huge. That's amazing. Yeah. And that would be enough to overlook a scar on her forehead, which, if I'm being honest, feels like a bit of a dramatic thing.
It is. It's Malta.
But to be fair, no, now that I've said that, I think it's more that she's been taken on a Chalcid ship and they would think that she was no longer a virtuous woman.
Right. Like what Captain Red was saying.
Exactly. So it doesn't matter that nothing happened. They would believe it. And that's more why she wouldn't have value. It's not about the mark on her forehead. Although I do like to believe a little bit she thinks the mark on her forehead is what would make them think she's damaged goods.
It is Malta.
It is Malta. But no.
We have her kind of contradicting herself at this point because she's like, even her grandmother would have to be proud of her. Even Reyn's family might ... So she's giving herself hope here with this plan.
Right.
And she decided at the beginning of her section, I'm setting that aside. It's in the past. I have to move forward. But the way to move forward might be able to get what she hopes for.
Exactly.
And the satrap's like, okay, you want Bingtown all to yourself? That's ridiculous. Is it? I'm offering you both your throne and your life in exchange for it. Besides, it's the best move anyways, because Bingtown's independence is almost assured anyway. And this way, you remain on good terms with them.
You're recognizing what already exists and making it possible for Jamalia and Bingtown to continue on friendly terms. Losing this wager would only mean that you had to take what is a wise course of action in any case.
So I have heard it argued before. I am not sure I agree with it. But how will you regain my freedom and my throne for me? Show me my profit and I will find the means. Agreed? And Satrap's like, okay, fine, agreed. You're not going to do it anyways, but like, you'll try.
Yeah, I might as well agree to it. You're not going to win.
And then at the end of that, she's like, okay, you're going to cooperate with me to do it. And he's like, well, okay, what now? Like,
yeah, like, okay, I already said I'd give you Bingtown. What else?
Yes. So she says, okay, you have to present yourself to our captors as I direct you to, and by agreeing with what I shall tell them. The fatalistic defeat that she had felt earlier in the evening had evaporated, so all she had left to her fortune was her wits. Perhaps that was all she had ever needed.
That is right there what I wanted to circle back to. So before she said she has her body and her wits, which implies that she's willing to use her body as a tool to get what she wants.
Which is what we talked about before, juggling the attentions of the two men to retain her freedoms and get information.
Exactly. Which absolutely a valid way to go throughout life. But I think it's really interesting that here she realizes that it isn't about, like, it's not just her sexuality that is something that she can utilize. Her brain is enough.
Yeah.
Like, she is smart enough to get out of this, and she doesn't have to do something she doesn't want to further her agenda. She gets to just use her brain. And I think that is really freeing for her to realize, like, she is smart enough to handle herself, because she went into this situation thinking, oh, I wish I was my Aunt Althea. I wish I was my grandma Ronica. Like, I don't know. I'm not able to do this. I don't have anything to me. And then gaining that confidence to realize she is smart. She is a trader, and she is able to make deals that work for everybody. She can take this and run with it and get something successful out of it. And I think that's a really big step for her.
Yeah. And so she ends this passage and this chapter by saying, like, I don't know what I'm going to say to them yet in response to Cosgo's question, but I think we need to get the pirates to believe in your power. And the pirates are the one who want to return you to your power. That's what we need on our side.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's going to happen yet, but that's my goal.
I'm going to do it. Don't worry about it.
Yep, exactly. So she needs to set her wits to that problem. And that's what we get in the future.
Yeah.
Because in the future, she negotiates with Kennet to basically establish the Pirate Isles as a kingdom, and the satrap gets to go back.
Yeah. That he'll acknowledge it, which is huge.
I think during the negotiations, the satrap is just annoyed by how long they're taking and starts taking over the negotiations and just ceding a bunch of stuff, and she gets more frustrated.
Yeah, and she's like, hold on.
Yeah. But it happens anyways, and it kind of works out.
Yeah. But no, I think it's really big. And I think it is big that she's overcoming the things that her father has put into her head, that, like, a woman's wits alone aren't enough. You know, I think that's the big thing, is that women have one way of doing things, and that's using their body.
Right.
But men have wits. And she's seeing that it's not just power. Men. Yeah. Men aren't the only ones with power and wit. Women do too. And she's able to tap into that, and she does have those wits about her. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. And now she knows that even though the satrap will try to, like, still try to get her to comfort him and stuff, she has this over him, like, oh, I'm trying to do something for both of us.
Exactly.
So she doesn't have to use her body anymore as much. She still has to walk that balance with Captain Red for now.
Right. Which is, you know, as just a woman in a dangerous spot, is something that you'd have to think about anyway.
Right.
But at least
now she can mostly focus on a plan.
Yes.
She has that's the most important thing, I think, for somebody in this situation. It's not the unknown. It's not the, I'll think of something when we get there. I just have to drag the satrap, this poor boy, along with me. It's okay. He's in agreement. I'm in control in this aspect. I have a way forward. Now I just need to think of it. Yeah. It's that goal to strive for.
Yeah. And I think that's big. It really gives her that hope. And I am going back to thinking about what you said in the beginning of sort of this duality of where Cirilla was and where Malta is, and, like, their similarities and, like, the shortcomings of their plans and how that all went down. And I'm thinking about it more and more, and I really feel like mostly what went wrong for Cirilla is the fact that she had to deal with a drugged up satrap.
Yeah.
I think, like, obviously Satrap is not an easy man to deal with. And I think also the history of their relationship is part of what sets him down the vindictive path to do what he did. Right. But I think there's also the added layer of he has all the yes men around him. He's drugged up. He's, you know.
Yeah. The difference is the trauma that he has gone through, and the ability to see that his name as satrap isn't worth all that much to people who don't respect it.
Exactly. And I think where Cirilla's ability to be honest and be an actual heart companion would have served him well, he wasn't able to take that information or accept that or even appreciate what she was giving or doing for him. And now with Malta and this situation that they're in, he's able to see, like, oh, it actually is worth it to have somebody in a dangerous situation talk to you straight and tell you what the risks are, what's going on, what you actually need to think about, rather than just say, little platitudes of like, oh, you're so great, you're lordly one, your mightiness, like that doesn't do anything for anybody.
Makes him feel good.
It does make him feel good, but it doesn't help. And I think that's something he couldn't have realized without this whole journey. And so unfortunately for Cirilla, it didn't work out for her. Mm-hmm. But if she had been there now, it would have sort of deal.
Yeah.
I don't know. So very, very interesting to see the two of them
navigated different situations slightly. Yeah.
But also I think part of the problem with Cirilla is that her pride wouldn't allow her to act in any means necessary to survive.
Right.
It like she couldn't bow her head.
She wouldn't have been able to take Kiki's advice.
No, she wouldn't have been able to. She wouldn't have been able to pretend to like the satrap to continue to live. Mm-hmm. Not that makes anything that happened to her fault or anything like that. I think they are two very different people. And so although they have similar goals in mind and similar ways of going about getting to those goals, it's their differences that mark why Malta is successful in what she's doing and why Cirilla has to try so much harder.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode. If you have thoughts that you want to send to us, you can always reach out and send them to our email, where it is fitzhappy@gmail.com, or you can go to our website, isfitzhappy.com, or isfitzhappy.podbean.com is the direct link. And then there's a tab at the top that says more links there. And you can find us on any of our social medias through that, or just go to our Facebook, Instagram, Threads, YouTube, Reddit, or Blue Sky, where it is Fitzhappy on all of those. Please leave us a comment of what you're thinking, your thoughts on the episodes, thoughts on how we run the episodes, thoughts on the books themselves.
Yeah, we always look forward to hearing what you have to say. See you next week.